I am Rox Berkey with my co-host, Guy Worthy. Hi, Guy.
Hi, Rox. Let's Talk About It is the newest Rave Waves production where we take on the controversial or popular topics of the day and try to relate those topics to books that can be found in our RRBC catalog, written by our awesome RRBC members. This way, we can open up a much-needed dialogue platform while also promoting our RBC member books.
RRBC is best known for only promoting our own members via Rave Waves, but Nani created Let's Talk About It to be a different kind of show. We'll be opening up this forum to outside guests who can enlighten us as well as educate us on some of the topics of today. For example, today's guests are experts in security, primarily digital or cybersecurity would be more familiar to most of us. These gentlemen work for a company called Converge One, supporting a broad base of customers in education, finance, government, healthcare, insurance, and more. Please help me welcome Tim Femister and Mazhar Islam. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Audience, we will be opening up the floor for questions and comments for today's guests at times throughout the show, but your mics will remain muted until those times. If you'd like to be acknowledged, please just a little wave of your hand will get our attention. And we also encourage use of the chat gallery for any questions or comments throughout the show. And we hosts will pick up on those. Cybersecurity is a hot topic, so we'll expect many questions from you all during the show. Rox, I think we're ready to start talking.
Great, Guy. Tim, let's begin with you. How did you happen to get into the complex world of cybersecurity?
Oh man, it's so I've been working. I came to Converge One through an acquisition, and through that acquisition, we had a security practice, and we did networking and data center, all the kind of the IT stuff. And security to me kind of just stuck out as one of those fascinating kind of ideas of kind of good guy versus bad guy, right? And in the networking world, it's hey, you can make a network, you make it faster. In data centers, you can build servers and applications. But in security, it was this kind of premise of hey, you're fighting for something, you're fighting kind of against someone, and that always intrigued me. So that was kind of my entry point into kind of veering towards that side of the road.
That's interesting. Was there a point where you thought you wouldn't be able to help your customers when their systems were compromised or something?
We have kind of a common saying that what's done is done. And so in many cases, the unfortunate truth around a lot of things is that once you've had a breach, you've had a breach. And so once your data has been taken from your network, it's now gone, right? And so we preach this consistent idea of proper prevention, detection, and recovery. And from a user standpoint, as you think about your own kind of personal lives, you can think about it in a similar fashion as well. How do we make sure we do the best things we can as our own users of our personal data to prevent someone from doing something malicious? How do we detect something that when something's happening, kind of use our own kind of thoughts and reasoning? Hey, this doesn't necessarily look right? So how can we detect something that may be going poorly? And then how do we respond and recover to an event? So once something happens, hey, it happened. But now what do? You can't just give up. Whether it's identity theft, whether it's ransomware, whether it's this idea of, hey, someone stole your data and your information and they're trying to sell it back to you, you have to figure out how do you respond. And so as users, we kind of all have that similar challenge. But the hard truth though, it's always easier to prevent than recover. Right now, it's a prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And the kind of applies really aptly to our industry.
Well, and that's a great perspective. So Mazhar, how do you stay on top of current events like the latest ransomware virus or other threats to consumers?
So that's really just, when it's part of just being passionate about security. When I first started off in the finance industry, I was on the IT side, but I was really on the with a financial company. It just became part of the mold that, that you had to secure everything. So it's just been a passion of mine from the get-go. And then a lot of it is really just reading, all the different articles, staying on top of the news and researching everything. And in my positions specifically, it's also part of the job as well, right? We have to stay on top of everything, research out what the latest different types of threats and attacks are out there, and help our clients, make sure that their security posture is up to speed so they can protect themselves, against the latest types of threats that are out there.
Oh, that's really good to know. So, hey, Guy, let's check the gallery for any questions. I see one from Sam. He asks, either of you can answer this. What's the appropriate level of cybersecurity for a small business? Because many of us really have our own small businesses with writing.
Do you want to take
Which
that
one of you?
Mazhar?
All right, Tim.
Sure, so yeah, I can take that one. I think that what you really have to do is that you have to take a look at a holistic approach. One of the first things that we preach to our clients is build better human firewalls, right? That is consistent not only in your personal life, it's also for business as well. Some of the simplest things are, if you get an email, don't trust every email. Just don't click on it. If it looks like it's something that's fishy, then don't click on it, because that can have an adverse effect. Some of those things are just common sense. So that would definitely be a start. If you have a small business and you have 4 or 5 or 10 employees, then that's really where you want to start with, is because that's probably what costs you the least, right? It's just keeping that ongoing education going, keeping that their training going, having regular conversations about cybersecurity, on making sure that you're putting in strong passwords, that you're not reusing your passwords. Those are the simplest things that actually don't really cost you anything. Beyond that, you can get into cybersecurity. Some small businesses, depending on how much funding you have, you can either put in your traditional firewalls, you can put in other applications like antivirus and different things to protect the network. But that gets really into a more in-depth conversation on the different levels of things that you can implement. One thing that I would definitely recommend is that security is a layered approach. You can't go out there and say, I'm going to go out there and buy all the different components and implement them all at the same time. Start picking out which items you think are going to be most important to you, maybe on the perimeter security side. If your endpoints don't have any virus or any kind of malware protection, start with those things and then keep layering them on, because this is a continuous cycle. It just never ends.
That's a great point. And Tim, back to what you had mentioned earlier about being compromised. What's done is done. Charles in the gallery is asking, what do we do as individuals or corporations if we find that we are compromised? What should we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so when you think about compromise, it can mean a lot of different things. It could be ransomware, where your laptop is now encrypted and you have to pay a fee basically to retrieve those files. It could be someone took your data, or someone's risking identity theft, or someone saying they have compromising photos of you, which may or may not be true, but we call it revealware, where they want to charge you for that. So you have to look at, first and foremost, what is it from a compromising standpoint that we're looking at? But I always recommend take a step back, right? Take a deep breath, and then kind of approach it logically. In most cases, a sensible answer really makes the most sense. And so you step back, take out some of the emotion of it, especially as an end user. In a business setting, it's a little bit different. In a business setting, there's obligations around breach notification and things around continuity and those kind of areas. But if it's you yourself, you look at, if it's ransomware, hey, do they really encrypt all your files? Do you have a backup somewhere else? Can you try those first before you pay a ransom fee, right? And if you're going to pay it, there is no guarantee you get your files back. You have to be at peace with that for whatever it is that you're going to pay. If someone sends you an email saying, hey, we have compromising photos of you in this setting, whatever it is, a lot of people say, oh no, right? But we take a step back and say, hey, none of that really makes sense. Because oftentimes it's just a threat and the threat is blind. We worked with a school district not that long ago that had a similar case where dozens and dozens of people got the same email saying, we have compromising photos of you in this scenario, right? And we're going to release it to the public if you don't pay this fine. The problem with that, right, was that everyone got the same email, so they're able to quickly demystify and realize, hey, this is a scam. But when it's just one person getting it, now you're like, well, I don't know. Can you send me a sample and those kind of things? You start to engage in this conversation. But that to me is the biggest overall step, is take a step back, take a deep breath, right? Most things you're able to effectively respond to or recover from, and just think through those options. But unfortunately, there's not a kind of a one thing cures all, right? It's really just taking that logical approach back to look at, okay, now where do we go? And the most common thing is ransomware and malware. What I would encourage is, if you are in that situation, oftentimes people will pay a ransom and think now we're good, right? But there's no guarantee that the malware was removed. You now make yourself an easy target to come back to for more money, right? It's kind of like when you lend money or something out, hey, now you're a person that is easy to come to for more money. Same thing. And so you want to make sure you do a wipe of your system, implement the controls that Mazhar talked about, use your head when you see an email, make sure you have some basic level of prevention in terms of endpoint security and those kind of things. And in general, most things are going to be all right.
Okay, we're going to take one more from the gallery and then and kind of go back to a couple of other things. So I'm going to make this comment that Shirley brought up, which was like, she got an email today, as a matter of fact, to sign her name to get rid of the Electoral College. Started to, but then stopped because I thought it could be a misinformation campaign designed to collect people's information. I'm so paranoid now. Should I have been so reluctant? Mazhar, what do you think?
I mean, being paranoid is not a bad thing, right? I mean, I think that every single email that you get from a source that you do not trust is definitely something that you should absolutely be concerned about. And based on the information that you've provided, which is fairly generic, there really is no way to tell whether that was something to just collect information, get your thoughts into it. I think that what we really have to do is that, and I almost have to go back to what President Obama said many years ago. Before you post anything online, be very, very careful what you post, because that could come back to haunt you years and years down the line, right? So whether that is something that you're posting in social media, whether it's a questionnaire that you're answering, anything that you post anywhere, one of the simplest things is people go on vacation and they start posting where they are. Well, guess what? If you have an open board and you're posting the things online that, hey, we're in Europe for the next 2 weeks, you just told someone with a malicious intent that your home is vacant for the next 2 weeks. So again, you can't be cautious enough with those things.
That's good advice. And Tim, I liked your really potent summary of take a step back and look at it logically, because often your emotions are being appealed to, and if you follow that emotional impulse, then you've fallen into the trap. And along those lines, I have an extreme emotional reaction to multi-factor authentication. I know what you're going to say, but is it really necessary?
Oh yeah, it is. On the multi-factor piece, absolutely, right? Your passwords are out there. I can almost guarantee that you have an account where your password that's active is being traded around in the dark web, right? There's services that we work with that have collections of 31 plus billion different username password combinations, and it's very easy to check that. If you think about kind of in the business world, right? Think about LinkedIn as a good example. Their entire database is breached. How confident are you that the password that you use within LinkedIn, your email address, is different than you may have used for some of your other critical accounts and information. If there's a likelihood they're similar, that's a very easy target, right? And I know from real experience, I change up my passwords and follow good cyber hygiene. But when we first looked at this solution, it's a kind of a large enterprise corporate solution. I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Let me try my own personal email address. And sure enough, my email address popped up in their database with a password that was encrypted. I decrypted it. It was my actual live password from before that I had changed, right? I had isolated it and all those good things, but it was real and it was there, right? And so when you think about multi-factor authentication and some of those steps, it's there for a very good reason, right? Because without it, anyone with a username and password combination can access it. Furthermore, on that step, people think about their personal email, and for whatever reason, a lot of people think their personal email is not that important, right? But I would argue to you today that your personal email is likely the most critical account you have that you own as an individual. All of your banking, all of your financial, all of your personal, all of your social media, all of those passwords can be reset typically with a simple email that goes to your personal email to reset it, right? And so we have Yahoo and Gmail and those things. Oftentimes people use less secure passwords for whatever kind of reason in those settings, but that's really the gateway to kind of all of your accounts, and it has a record of all of your accounts as well too, because we all receive email from the people we bank with and work with and interact with. So I would certainly argue that strong secondary authentication and also strong notifications of other logins from other areas are really hypercritical to your own personal security.
You have anything to add to that, Mazhar?
No, I think Tim definitely nailed it on that one, and I can concur on the LinkedIn example as well. So with the one other thing that I would recommend on that is that if you are not recommending it, but if you are going to use the same password in multiple locations, make sure that the types of passwords that you're using are either not exactly identical, or at least you have a good idea that if your financial passwords are different from your passwords on, say, social media like LinkedIn. So I received the exact same email multiple different times that someone had hacked my, and they essentially mentioned that they knew my passwords and they knew how to get into my accounts, and they provided the password to me in my email. And it was one of my older passwords, and I knew exactly where I used that password. It was my LinkedIn password. I knew that LinkedIn had been breached. Now, the good thing for me is that I knew that was the one place where I used that password. So I didn't really bother with it. But that can be an issue if you're reusing the same password in multiple different locations, and someone sends you, here's your password. Then at that point, you really have no idea which part of your online profile essentially has been breached. And these days with banking and everything else that we're doing online, really the only way to mitigate that is if the provider is providing two-factor authentication, like a callback to your cell phone, please use that. Passwords just simply are not the only way to go anymore. And we know there are entire databases of passwords out there. So just password alone is simply not going to be enough anymore going forward.
What is your opinion about the Apple password suggestions?
Apple, if you're talking about what I would really recommend on that side is that any system that generates a password is really using random characters, which probably are not as personal to you. So what I would really recommend is using a passphrases, something that but it's not a singular word, right? So something like, I like pineapples and apples, right? Those are two of your favorite foods, and it's now a complete phrase or a sentence. So you can't necessarily break that with a dictionary password, because those 4 or 5 words strung together just simply are not going to exist in any kind of a dictionary. And since those are two of your favorite foods, you probably have a better chance of remembering that rather than using something that's auto-generated, right? It's random characters. Yes, it's difficult, but it's also difficult on you. And pretty soon, if you have 20 or 15 of those different, really complicated passwords, that in itself drives complacency, right? Then you're going to say, okay, this is just too difficult. I'm just going to go to something very simple. And the more difficult you make it for yourself, the less likely you are to follow that regimen.
Yeah, that's what worries me about the generated ones. You can't remember them, so you have to list them.
Right, exactly. So it's much easier to string a few words together of things that and you recognize, because you're more likely to remember those types of passwords.
Yes, I've got a couple like that, and it's weird. I don't think anyone could break them. You're right. Thank you.
Okay, Tim, do you find that there is more vulnerability with certain demographics? And if so, which ones seem to be more vulnerable in your opinion, and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. It varies, right? And so I'll back up kind of my statement with this idea that everyone thinks about hackers with the hoodie on that are really good at coding and writing really great software. The truth of the matter, right, is they're really great cyber psychologists, not just great cyber folks writing code. And typically we now separate the function between those that make malware and those that actually get it on your system. Right, the ones that get in your system are fantastic at understanding at what makes you tick so that you're going to click. And so when you think about that, right, people will target certain demographics based on that knowledge. Even look at Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank as an example. She herself fell victim to a $400,000 scam, right, with no malware involved, just emailing her, right, and making it look like it came from someone that was trusted, right, and they provide authorization through her organization to make that payment. Certainly seniors tend to be a common victim, but that demographic isn't fully fair on its own because it really does apply across a much larger set of people. If you look at some of the statistics, roughly 9 out of 10 attacks are still originating through spear phishing. That is highly targeted emails written to you, right, to get you to click on something. And when you click, right, that can be an installation of malware. When you respond, that could be authorization for payment to give to someone else, wire transferring funds, right? Everyone, right, is falling victim. We can't look at it as a singular demographic. It really is a much broader set of people that, if they understand who you are, what makes you tick, they're going to write a highly convincing email to you, right? And it's only getting better, right? The language proficiency is getting better because think about it 10 years ago, right? It was about the Nigerian prince offering to share his wealth, right? If you just pay me this amount, right? And it worked at the time, right? But the sophistication we see today is vastly different than what it was 10 years ago, right? You have native English speaking folks, right, that are writing sophisticated emails that understand the layout of your small business or of your organization or what you do as a small business owner, right? And so those are the folks, right? It's much easier to get you to pay through social engineering than it is to actually use hacking, right? So I saw a few comments in there where someone was saying they were threatening to release my personal information or my client list and it would ruin my business. And those, in some cases, that could be very true. But I would always ask the question, okay, show me, prove it, right? What do you have? Give me, if you have it, you're not afraid of sharing it, right? Because you already have it. The risk is not me knowing what it is because my information, right? And typically, if the answer is, no, I'm just going to release it, that's typically not going to be the case. Typically, they're the folks that really don't have it. The ones that really want to get paid, you look at ransomware is a great example. They'll show you your files. Like, hey, we have your files, and let me show to you what it is right here, because they know that's the fastest way for them to earn their money. Because this is a way that people earn their living across the world, right? Is through extortion, right? It's an extortion economy.
Wow. Yep, I can't even deny that. So, we're stuck in the middle of COVID-19 and companies are trying to pivot in unusual ways, somewhat unnatural at times, for business continuity, as well as to keep their employees working. Because of these last minute changes that everyone was forced to go to and working from home, still under the umbrella of their company's servers, has this increased the risk of confidential information escaping into the dark net? Mazhar?
This has created, and we're seeing this on a daily basis, this has definitely increased the level of complexity. It has increased the potential for information to what we call data leakage or data loss. It has increased definitely the potential for both items, because when you look at a traditional company where everyone goes into the organization, they sit at their computer and they do their work on a day-to-day basis, all the security mechanisms are within the organization, whether it's the firewalls, the antivirus, and everything else. Well, with essentially most of the workforce becoming remote, a lot of people have taken those laptops and those workstations home. And so now when you plug that computer in and into your home network, if you have family members and you have kids who are, browsing elsewhere, even if the person who works for the company is following all the proper cybersecurity hygiene, you really can't guarantee that all the family members are doing the same thing. And if one of those computers becomes compromised, there's a good chance that that corporate system that's attached to that same network can become compromised. So what we're seeing is an increased reliance on our clients coming in and saying, okay, how do we further do segmentation and protect our corporate assets that are now sitting in people's homes? And it's definitely a challenge that almost all companies are facing. We're also seeing that the workforce has been reduced. You call in to a credit card company to ask for help if you're having any issues with, say, your bank information on your credit card. And what does that person tell you? I am not working in the office. I'm working from home. And because either due to PCI or other compliance requirements, I can no longer access your records. There are limited things I can do, and you now have to call in within a specific time window when people are actually in the office. So you're seeing essentially the number of services being reduced, and the level of service that is being offered is diminished. So there is a myriad of issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis because the workforce is remote in today's age.
Even things like Alexa in your home, right? You think about call center agents now. There's now rules, hey, you can't, because you have access to financial data from customers, you have to turn off some of those home use devices like an Alexa and those kind of things, right? So there's all these new challenges that are starting to emerge as well, right? That the couple on to what Mazhar mentioned. So it's a fascinating time from an industry geek, right? It's a fascinating time, but certainly the attack surface has widened. The number of attacks have rapidly increased. And then I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is that typically in the past, when maybe you went down the hall to talk to someone, it's now being done through emails even more so than before, right? So that level of email traffic and the communication we get is now increasing, right, 5 to 10-fold. And so there's a much better and great opportunity of someone saying, hey, send this wire transfer, whereas before, they drop it off at your desk. Now it's an email, but now it may actually not be in a legitimate email. And there's multiple cases, even personal friends, where their businesses have gone through that same process and wire transfer to a different wire number, but it was a phishing email that they just didn't know, right? It was a spoofed email. They couldn't tell at the front of it, and they didn't look into it too deep. And then it realized, hey, we paid the wrong person money, right, through the scam. And so that all those things today are kind of happening in tandem. It really is a fascinating time, and also time for more increased vigilance.
Those are very good points. Tim, what are, let me just test your short list ability here. What are 3 things that individuals might do to right now to increase their security, and kind of tag on to that? Should they be buying some kind of program to put on their own computer?
As a personal user, I think there would be the 3 things to your point. The first one is around prevention. So do the basics. And so if you're going to purchase a program, and I think that does make sense. It doesn't have to be a very expensive program. A lot of this now has been commoditized. It's lower cost. You can buy I'm not going to recommend any one name, but kind of a name recognized antivirus platform. I wouldn't go out and just download one that you've never heard of, but download one of the names that you've heard of kind of circulating in the industry. There's lots of them, and big companies where it's pretty easy to distill that down, but do that, right? And as part of doing the basics, make sure you're patching your systems often. If you think about some of the big ransomware incidents in the past, a lot of it came from just not patching your systems. And so if you have a Windows laptop, for example, right, in the case of the WannaCry ransomware from a few years back, if you had simply had that system relatively updated, there was a patch that was applied to fix the flaw. But millions of people didn't update it for over 90 days. And it was only the folks that hadn't updated for over 90 days that are actually impacted. But this was a few years back now. I think it was a few months ago, there was a Tech Republic article, and it was 2 million computers are still vulnerable today to WannaCry. That means they hadn't patched their system in 3 to 4 years at all, right? So do the basics. If you do those basics, right, that covers a lot. The second part of it is making sure you have a backup of all your critical data. So if you have your data, I don't care how you back it up, you can back it up. Ideally, as a security geek, you're backing it up to a physical drive that's in your desk. You're having some kind of cloud secure repository. You have multiple copies, but at least have a copy, right? So if ransomware were to hit, if someone were to compromise your data in some way so you couldn't access it, now you have at least a way to restore off of it. The third thing would be really around just being vigilant in your awareness, right? So think before you click. If you don't recognize it, don't click it. Look at the email domain where it's coming from. And so a common thing to look for is when someone sends you an email that says it's from @amazon.com. I saw some of those examples in the chat. @amazon.com is what it looks like. But if you actually hover over that from email address, you actually look at where is it really being sent from, you see it's not amazon.com. It's a 25-digit URL that someone created yesterday to send to you. And they just name their name as, feedback@amazon.com or whatever it might be. So do those three things. If you do those three things, you're better off than 90% of the folks out there. And you're going to prevent probably 90-95% of the things that are going on out there. There's some things where it just happens. It's going to be hard to prevent because it's highly sophisticated. But think through the lens of typically an end user is not the person that's the target of a highly sophisticated attack. It's a CEO of a corporation. It's a corporate controller. Someone has access to cash. Someone has access to intellectual property. If that's not you, if you're kind of a typical average computer user, do those core basics and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape.
There's a comment in the chat, Tim, right along that same line. And the question is, it could go to either of you, but you just kind of mentioned it, Tim. Should people accept all of the updates that come to your computer system or to your cell phones?
I personally, Mazhar is a much more technical person than I am, so I'll let him give the better answer. But my answer to that is typically, in most cases, yes. Right, I'm going to update my routers. I'm going to update my personal devices, right, to the latest releases. In most cases, you are fixing security flaws, because you have to think that when someone fixes a security flaw and releases an update, it's doing two things. The first thing it's doing is helping secure your device. The second thing it's doing is making a big announcement to every hacker in the world that there's a security flaw in the system and here's where it is. So it's a little bit of a race, right? So if you choose not to update it, you're now kind of just waiting for everyone else to get up to speed with that flaw to try to penetrate your system that hasn't been updated. So that's kind of my general view. But Mazhar, again, has a much better technical mind than mine. So I'll defer to him for the more official answer.
I'm actually going to give a more of a rather political answer there, and the answer is it depends. What it depends on whether that will stop your ability to function as a business. So say that you are using a computer or you're using certain business applications on your mobile phone or your tablet, etc., that are several versions old. And if you do those updates, will those older applications continue to function? So the best case scenario is exactly what Tim mentioned. Absolutely, go ahead and do the updates. the cautionary tale there is that if you have a rather older application that is critical to you, and there is a chance that that application may not work once that that update goes through, let's just say that there's a new operating system update that comes out for either Android or iOS. If you go through with that update, you should already know this by now, since we've already had smartphones for several years, that a lot of those applications become extinct, right? They just don't function on the newer code. So at that point, you really have to make a decision. If you keep that device on the operating system for specific applications and don't do the updates, then you're for the rest of your applications, you're probably going to end up having to use a completely separate system. So yes, the answer is absolutely do the updates. But be cautionary there about those unique applications that can run into problems. And if it's something that's critical to your business, then at that point, the answer would be a no.
Very good. Thank you for that insight. Let's check the gallery. Anybody out there want to ask some more questions right now? And let me scan back to see what I missed.
Sam asked an interesting question about home-based routers. Are they considered a vulnerability?
They have vulnerabilities.
Vulnerability, right? I mean, what you get out of the box from from whoever your ISP is, those are relatively simple devices. I mean, they provide a basic security mechanism. So they're better than nothing. But the question is, how much better? So if you're looking at some sort of a commercial system, especially if you own a small business, you definitely want to look at some of the smaller enterprise level solutions that are considerably better. So the answer is it depends on the environment. If it's your home computer and the only people that are on there are just kids playing around, then maybe that system will be fine. If not, then they're taking a look at a commercial system makes more sense. Even within the system that is provided to you, remember that not all its security functions are going to be enabled. Everyone in this day and age uses Wi-Fi. If someone really has a mind to break into a wireless network, what we tell our clients is that wireless can absolutely be broken into. It doesn't matter what level of protection you put around it. If someone really wants to break through that wireless, then they're going to get in anyway. But don't rely on the default settings. Those are typically not the most secure settings. Go in there and at the very least, enable some of the advanced functions that are within their device. Definitely a better solution if you're a small business would be to move to a system that, and again, I'm not going to name any brands, but typically it's a function of cost, right? So if you're buying something that costs you $30 or it came free from the ISP, it typically does not provide the level of security that you need for this day and age.
We have a question from Jan about, and she did ask it earlier, but it didn't get picked up earlier. So sorry, Jan. How secure are applications like Dropbox?
So they are. So I think that they are secure. The companies themselves are definitely taking the right measures to secure those platforms. But they're probably as secure until the day that they are not, right? So so they can be taking care of all the security measures, and somewhere something gets in. And we saw this with Heartland, which at that time was the number 4 credit card processor. You typically don't hear them because they're not necessarily a household name, but it was definitely in the news everywhere. So this is not hidden information that about 3 or 4 years ago, if you received a new credit card or if you've received a slew of credit cards, all over again, it was because there was a major breach within credit card processing, and because of that, all the credit cards had to be reissued. So and that goes on. All you have to do is just go and take a look at the news, right? There's company after company. Most name brands have had their breaches. So I would be careful about the type of information you post in there, right? So can you use it to save files and documents? Absolutely. Would I go in there and use that as my backup for my W-2s? Absolutely not, right? So again, use common sense. Absolutely use them, but be careful what type of information that you're posting. Anything that's going to compromise your security, anything that you would normally not post online openly, I would not be posting into anything, even though it's password protected.
Yeah, and
We're a bunch of, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of really good points, Mazhar, right? I think what a lot we're getting at too is around risk mitigation and the measurement of risk. And to your comment of W-2 versus family photos, yeah, W-2 we don't want to put on Dropbox, but family photos probably okay, right? And so look at everything in a measure of risk, and what's the risk if the data is exposed, right, or encrypted, and those things, and then what is your countermeasure or what is your alternative measure based on that risk, right? And so I see some questions around credit cards and storing them on online sites, and I may have a kind of an unpopular opinion here, but as a security guy, a lot of my stuff's okay. If you take my credit card, kind of, so what, right? I have plenty of credit cards, right? I've got a resiliency there, right? Okay, if you charge something, okay, I'll see it, right? It's not coming out of my bank account. What I protect really closely is my bank account, right? So checks are I try not to use checks. I try not to do anything that touches my bank account directly, except a few things. But the rest of that stuff, I'm like, okay, if you steal my credit card, then someone else is the credit card company will deal with it. I'm not out any money. My risk is pretty limited, right? Those things are pretty mature now in terms of those areas, right? And same thing with the PayPal and some of those areas. It's really looking at what is your think about every question. What is your total risk that you're putting out there by taking this action, right? So we take your super sensitive information. Okay, keep that pretty close to the vest, but family photos and your basic credit card data and those things, probably not the biggest risk. And honestly, hackers probably aren't looking for your family photos, right? They're looking for the data that can duplicate your identity, and that's what you want to kind of think through, right? Everyone is coin operated from a hacker perspective, right? Typically, it's about making money, right? So what do you have, right, that's worth money to them? Medical records and all those things to duplicate identity, right? All those are the areas where people start to get really more interested.
I have a question. Hi, Tim. Hi, Mazhar. It's Naughty Jules. My question is, a lot of people believe that Apple can't be hacked. They think that their iPhones are safe, their Mac computers are safe. What do you guys believe in regards to that?
That's really a fallacy, right? It's pretty common. People always think that Windows computers can be breached and Macs can't.
Sure.
And what really that stems from is that there was a certain point in time where there was a huge deployment of Microsoft systems, so it was just easier and a better target, right? Because everyone was using that particular platform, and there just weren't that many Apple or Mac devices out there. So it wasn't a big enough target for the hackers, but that scenario has changed over time to where Apple has become, or Apple devices, I should say, have become, an equally big target for the hackers to go after. So I think from an organization and a company perspective, those companies like Google with their Android OS and Apple with their Apple iOS and Microsoft, they're all doing their part. But there's always a chance that a new vulnerability is going to be found, and then that is going to be exploited, and someone will be able to breach, one or more types of devices because of that. So that thinking, I think, may have been valid several years ago, but
Mhm.
it doesn't apply in in today's age.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question they want to ask? Raise your hand and we will be happy to.
I have one more question. It may not be one more, but here's my question. Tim, you mentioned maybe Dropbox not being the safest place to open information such as your W-2s. So where would a very safe place be for us to open or access our W-2s?
Yeah, great question. I think it's more about where you store it and where the data resides. There's kind of a couple answers on how secure you want to get, right? And it goes again back to risk and the rest of it. And if you want to get ultra secure, you can store it on an external hard drive. You can leave that hard drive unplugged, and when you need to access that data, you can then plug it into your laptop, access it when you need to, like view it, not save it locally, and then you unplug it, right? That typically would be a pretty safe way. I know there's some folks we get kind of geekier, right? There's folks that take USBs and they put it into a hard safe, right? And they lock the safe up and that's where they store their data. And some people have an actual need based on the sensitivity of the data, and some folks just want to keep it secure. But at the very least, have it on your local machine. I wouldn't want to be putting it into some kind of public cloud repository, whether it's a Dropbox or Box and those things. Not that it's not secure. It just you keep that a little closer to the vest, and then always make copies of your data, right? And those copies can be on an external hard drive. But to me, kind of safest option, right, is have a secure endpoint. Never share that data with somebody if they ask for it, unless you truly trust who they are. And then if you really want to keep it secure, put it on an external hard drive, unplug it, keep it in your desk drawer. And typically that's a pretty good measure for most kind of common use cases for kind of sensitive data.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So in the chat, we've got a couple of people. Sam started and then Wanda added on to it. There's a lot of ads that come out specifically around a home title lock protection. Is that a scam? Do you know? Are you familiar with it?
Are you talking about identity theft advertising that we're seeing, or are you just talking about a website? I'm a little unsure.
I haven't seen the ad myself. Oh, Sam wants to be unmuted. Nani, please.
Hi, everybody. So you hear this ad frequently on satellite radio on many different channels, and it's a company called Home Title Lock Protection. And the premise of their service is that hackers can essentially go online, find the deed to your home, and then retitle the deed, and then people can come evict you from your home. And then they, of course, bring people on the air that claim that this has happened to them. And it's a scare tactic. But I think a lot of people are jumping on that, and I just was interested in your opinion as to whether or not that's something that folks should be mindful of.
It may be valid. I have not personally heard of that specific type of an attack. What I would really recommend doing is that we've had companies that are doing credit monitoring for quite a while, and those are name brand companies that are doing that. And now they've also added identity theft monitoring to that services. A lot of times it's even offered through your employer. I know that in our case, Converge One offers that as a service to us. So that's what I would probably be more interested in, is having credit monitoring done and identity theft being monitored. And the other point I would also add to that side of it is that when you look at that, we also want to look at vulnerable populations, right? We want to obviously secure ourselves because we may be the primary income for a specific household, but that also extends to your parents, and I would also argue that it also extends to your children as well. Because if you really think of it, if their information is breached, they have a valid date of birth, a social security number, and if that identity is compromised, the hacker can use that for years and years. And when are they going to find out that they have really bad credit? When they go to college and they apply for credit at that time. So someone will have a run on their credit for the next 10 years. They'll keep making the minimum payments and keep racking up the bills. And then, until it's completely unusable. So not only do you want to do credit monitoring and ID theft monitoring for yourself, you want to do it for your entire family.
Yeah, agreed. And also I use credit freezes, and I think the kind of the answer back as well too is around tolerance to risk, right? Is it possible, right, that someone could use that tactic to put damage on you from the title or whatever the kind of deal was? Yeah, it's possible, right? What's the percentage of that happening? It's probably very, very slim, right? Maybe not, but it's most likely something that's a very, very low percentage. And so you got to kind of evaluate, like in everything in life, right? Is it worth spending money, right, to mitigate this 0.001% chance of something happening? Now, it still might happen, right? And so one of the questions we kind of like to ask is, what's the number one way, right, to guarantee security? Like, what's the one thing you can do where I can guarantee you that your information, your cyber information, digital information is going to be secure? Any thoughts on an answer?
Unplug from the internet.
Take your laptop and break it right over your leg, right? It's remove your digital enterprise, stop doing any transactions. But the reality is, for the vast super majority, is that we're not going to do that, right? And I think that there's a sense where a lot of folks are afraid to be online and afraid to store things and afraid to use credit cards. And I think by and large, you really don't have to be in most of those cases. I think most things are probably gonna be okay. Again, if your credit card gets stolen, it gets stolen, right? But typically the banks will take care of that. You're typically not out any money on your own. I guarantee someone already has your social security number. It's already out there. There's been enough breaches, right? It's no longer a secret in most cases, right? So a lot of that stuff is already there. But now it comes back to, how do you make sure you just do the basics around prevention around that machine, right? Be aware from a cyber standpoint, have the right detection mechanisms around credit monitoring and freezes. But outside of that, right, you should also be able to enjoy, right, the great things we have available to us through this digital time. And so I think that it goes both ways, right? I think we see a lot of folks kind of have too much fear to email and too much fear to engage online. I think there's still a lot of benefit that people may shy away from out of fear of security, right? I think it really is a balance, right? It's a measure of risk, and it's a balance of kind of doing those core right things. And then for the rest of it, you're probably going to be okay.
So Tim, Raymond asked about using a VPN, and we did talk about it briefly, but should we be using VPN connections?
Well, the question is always which VPN, right? Because VPN is a virtual private network, and what you're doing is you're taking your data, right, and sending it encrypted through another system to get to your end state. And so you can use a bad VPN or a vulnerable VPN, right, and have an issue. But by and large, in a corporate setting, right, VPN certainly makes sense. But the overarching conversation around that is encryption of your data, right? You want to have encrypted connectivity from you to your banking, from you to your, whether it's email, whether it's corporate systems. It should be an HTTPS, right, meaning secure connection. And then VPN on top of that is great. But you want to also think logically too. If it's a random company offering you a low-cost VPN that you haven't heard of, all they're doing is installing an agent on your machine. You're sending all of your data to someone else, right? And they're routing it elsewhere. So you got to kind of think through, does that make the most sense? But again, in a corporate setting, using a business level service that's known, certainly I think VPNs make a lot of sense. I'll also defer to Mazhar, the more technical of the two of us, right, for his thoughts, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Right, and I concur exactly. So again, if you're a small business and you're sitting at home and you need to connect to your servers because you need to download files, what have you, a VPN solution from essentially two systems that you own absolutely makes perfect sense. You want that data encrypted and not going essentially in clear text across the internet. If there are services out there that are selling bundled services with a firewall and a VPN, and as Tim mentioned, all you're doing is you're sending your information through their pipeline, and then at some point it's going to be exposed out on the internet anyway. So a better mechanism for that is that if you are logging into, say, a banking website or anywhere else, is to just make sure that when you look at that web browser, that little lock that's on there, that lock is closed. That means that the data is SSL encrypted from your system to whatever server that you're communicating with. And in that type of a scenario, really, that the VPN is not needed. The same thing goes with email. As long as you're using any kind of an enterprise level email solution, most email these days is what's known as TLS encryption is being used on email. So between those two channels, you will find that a lot of different things are already encrypted. I mean, even if you go to YouTube right now and you want to browse, I don't know, a video of a cat jumping around, even that is is SSL encrypted in this day and age. So I think that level of protection when you're going to a lot of those sites, as long as you just take a look at some of these simple mechanisms, it's already there. And then the same thing goes for your personal devices as well. As far as encryption goes, some of the simplest things that you can do on your personal mobile phone or your tablet, you can enable pin lock, right? Which is either a 4-digit or a 6-digit code to essentially just say that you have to put that code in. Yes, it's a little annoying. You have to do that every time that you try to unlock the device, even when you're receiving a phone call. But what it does is that simple task of enabling pin lock enables encryption, which means that not just your data, but everything, including the operating system on that device or their tablet, is now completely encrypted. Without that, the device is completely open. So it's a very simple, idea of just that one little task will completely secure that device for you, right? So it's those simple things. You really don't have to spend money on cybersecurity. There's so many things that you can just do from again, going to that, building that human firewall, right? If you're just aware and you think about some of these things, then there's so much that you can do without having to go out there and say spend money on a VPN type solution per se.
Thanks. That's really, really good advice. Well, Rox, it looks like it's time for us to wrap up, but boy, was this a great show. Before we go, we'd like for you to check out this segment's featured title, The Enigma Factor, by authors Brakefield and Berkey. Ooh, there it is. Rox is holding it up. Like most of the novels in this series, a security threat is woven into the story. Some of today's discussion ties in perfectly to this read, so we hope you'll snag a copy.
Tim Femister, I want to thank you for taking time to drop in today to share your perspective on cybersecurity with this group. Might you have any final words for our audience today?
No, I'd say thanks for the time. I'll leave you with maybe one very brief story. I was working with a large kind of vendor that everyone here would know the name by offhand. He ran a security unit. He was doing a talk and he said, this laptop right here, if someone had this, right? He's talking about the great security had on it, right? If someone had this, it'd be worth $300 million, the data I have on this laptop, because it has the keys to all the security for all these things, right? I have all this great security on it. And I looked at him and said, hey, so that laptop right there, if I took that laptop and I got the password from you, I could get $300 million, right? And in essence, that was this conversation. And so what I encourage all of you is use common sense, right? When you think about the realm of cybersecurity, in that case, you had someone who had all the great technical information, all the great stuff on there, but thought through, hey, I'm telling everyone that this thing is worth all this money, right? And I'm not thinking through the factor of, hey, someone could just take my laptop from me right now and it's open and download the files. There's nothing I can do about it, right? And so I would encourage all of you, we surf the web, you interact online, right? Enjoy it, right? Use it. There's a wealth of things you can leverage. Just use common sense. And if you do the basics, right, typically that's far superior than I think that kind of the average user may have, right? Kind of some of those core things. You're gonna be far better off from attack than I think most are going to be, right? So that would be my encouragement is don't shy away from the net. Just use common sense, right? Think through kind of what you click on and those elements, right? And leverage the great resources we have available to us. But with that, thank you for the time. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Mazhar, thank you as well for taking time today and enlightening our audience with your points of view. Do you have a few final words?
Absolutely. So really, again, thank you for your time, everyone. What I would say is information is really, power. So it's literally in this day and age where we have so much information at our fingertips. All you literally have to do is go out there and Google personal cyber security and a few things like that. And what you'll start seeing is that you'll start seeing a recurring theme, right? It's not that there are hundreds of different ways that are out there. So you'll start seeing those common ways how you can secure yourself, and don't be complacent, which is that, if you're joining the show today and you take those tips, don't let it be that the next time you review cybersecurity be a year from now, right? Keep that top of mind, because the threat landscape continues to change. The type of threats and vulnerabilities will continue to change, and the way that the hackers exploit those will continue to change. So it should be something that you're vigilant about, that you regularly look up to see maybe, hey, what else could I be doing? And then as long as that stays top of mind, I think that at the very core, the idea is to make yourself more secure. You really want to have enough layers of security to that someone else is an easier target, right? One of the things that hackers will not do is that they want your time is money to them. They're not going to spend a ton of time on you when there are, millions of people out there that have very lax security protocols in place. So as long as you're staying vigilant, the idea is that, you have enough in place where someone else is an easier target and they'll just move on.
That's great. Audience, we sincerely hope you have enjoyed today's segment of Let's Talk About It. And we hope we've left you with much to talk about long after you leave us. Join us again next month when we tackle another hot topic.
And remember, if you miss an episode of Rave Waves, Let's Talk About It, you can always listen to the archives of any of our shows directly from the past Rave Waves show tab on the RRBC site. Thanks to you who joined us in the Rave Waves gallery today. I'm Rox Berkey.
And I'm Guy Worthy.
Be safe and try and stay well. Remember to vote. Bye for now.